Hello, everyone. So I had a request sent to me in my email inbox for me to review a movie called The Platform. Now, I did watch this movie a few weeks back about when the coronavirus quarantine thing started, so many other people have posted their reviews, and this was trending on like the top 10 of Netflix for a while, so I know a lot of people have seen it. But in the event you have either haven't seen it or you have and you're just kind of wondering about my thoughts, even though there's plenty of YouTube reviews about this at this point, I thought I'd talk about The Platform because it was a movie that I really did love and enjoyed quite a bit. Prior to it launching on Netflix, I want to say like 2 or 3 weeks before it launched, I started seeing reviews of it in the horror movie media, and they were talking about how it's a metaphor for economic inequality and that sort of thing, and obviously that sort of percolates my little leftist brain. The movie does fit the log line you may have heard about it, which is basically like Cube, the 97, 98 Vincenzo Natali Canadian film about the people who are trapped in the cubes and have to escape, which was followed by two very bad sequels. But Vincenzo Natali's gone on to make Splice and some other really good movies, In the Tall Grass. And Snowpiercer, Bong Joon-ho's film, pre-Parasite, where everybody loves him now. But Snowpiercer was his first like American film. The Weinsteins kind of ruined the theatrical release of it, prior to everybody realizing Weinstein was an asshole, not just for ruining movies. But it does sort of combine those two things, and it does it really well. So, first thing I'll say is, if you haven't watched the movie yet and you're interested in watching it on Netflix, when you first start it, it will immediately start playing the dubbed version. Now, I know after Parasite won the Oscar, there was a lot of people arguing on Twitter that there was like the subtitle people versus the dub people. I'm a subtitle person. I understand dubbing's great for like the visually impaired and some other stuff, but I think with subtitles you get the original actor's performance and you can judge their acting by the inflection, and it helps than if you just have like people in an ADR booth overdubbing it or whatever. But if you just change the settings, you can turn it to the original language with the subtitles pretty quickly. But it's a Spanish language film. And it sort of takes place in like a dystopian future sort of thing where you have a vertical... I don't want to say it's a prison, but it's a prison. Only because some people are there for committing crimes, and then some people sign up to be there with a prize at the end, so it's almost like they're people going into an experiment sort of thing, so I guess it's kind of a mix of both. Very Panopticon vibes of it. And it's about a bunch of vertical levels, and two people are on one level apiece, and they're numbered 1 to, who knows how many until the end, but a lot of floors. And essentially, once a day, a platform that doesn't seem to be suspended to anything comes down with food, and it stops at each level that's inhabited, and people take as much as they want, regardless of how much they actually need to sustain their calorie intake or whatever, and it will go lower by lower than that. So anybody who's on the top layer would get their pick of litter, and anyone at the bottom might just have scraps or nothing at all, or just broken plates and glass and everything like that. So immediately we have sort of a vertical metaphor for wealth distribution. People at the top get it, and the people at the bottom get the scraps. And you follow these two people, and I forget the characters' names at this point. It has been a few weeks since I've watched it. But our main character is a guy, he's chosen to go into this for getting a diploma at the end, which I assume is like a degree in the United States. So he's signed up for a 6-month tour here, and you're on a different level once a month. So once a month they'll change it, so you could be on level 10 and then on level 100 or that sort of thing. And his cellmate when the film starts is this guy. You find out he was there for basically manslaughter, and he's there for about a year. And their relationship is... The film does a good job in the opening scenes of trying to get through the rules of this universe and a lot of expository dialogue, which could be very boring if it's just two people explaining the rules of this. But the film does a very good job of giving these characters a lot of personality, so that they don't feel just like one-dimensional ciphers. That way, even though you are getting a data dump of what this universe is like, the characters are at least interesting with it. The cellmate who's in there for the manslaughter, he likes to use the word obviously a lot, and he's sort of a bit combative about all the questions he's getting, and he wants sort of a trade-off of question for question. And then there's a couple other things in this universe, like each person who gets in is allowed to take like one object from the outside. So some people take practical things like weapons. Some people take and one guy takes an inflatable pool apparently. Our main character takes a copy of Don Quixote. And you basically follow different philosophies of how to work within this system. And that's sort of where the film ends up going. Because the manslaughter guy is not the only cellmate our main character has throughout the course of the film. He has a couple others, and they each have a different strategy for dealing with how they are in this prison, and that is sort of a corollary to different ways of working within a system, or like what is your praxis for getting past this unjust system. So, we also have a character, there's this like silent woman who likes to ride the platform down every level because she's looking for her missing child, and there's a question throughout the movie about whether she's crazy or whether she does have a child, because supposedly there's no minors who are allowed in this prison. And you also see the people who make the food. The food is almost like its own character in this movie, where at the top level, before it's lowered down to any of the prisoners, it's all well set up like this, royal banquet hall, like something out of Versailles Palace pre-French Revolution, or something like Queen Elizabeth might have at like a state dinner or whatever. It's and the film lets you know that like each meal that's on this is like one of the prisoners' favorite meals. They always take like what's their favorite food, and that is always also made part of that. And then people are such in a rush to get the food that they kind of they eat with their hands because they don't have utensils. They kind of smash through everything. There's some alcohol on there too, and there's things like that. It's it starts off as looking very nice and proper, and then it just kind of looks disgusting. People just eating handfuls of unidentifiable slop on there. What the movie is essentially saying, just on the surface level, is pretty simple. It's just about economic inequality and economic hierarchy. But people seem to not agree on what the movie's ultimate message is beyond that thematic metaphor. In the movie, without saying what happens during it, it does have one of those ambiguous endings that movies like this have. Like, Cube has one where the autistic guy survives. Spoiler for Cube, it's like a 23-year-old movie now at this point. But where the autistic guy, he ends up going into like this bright light and escapes, and you don't know what happens until the shitty sequels, Hypercube and Cube Zero. Do not recommend either of those, by the way. But Cube's great. So here's how I'm interpreting this movie for those of you who have seen it. Those of you who haven't, and I've already given you probably enough information, maybe too much to go into it, it's an excellent movie. I highly recommend watching it. You can stop this video and watch it right now if you haven't. But if you have, and you're wondering about a couple more thoughts, I'll go into a little bit of spoilery stuff here. Turning out. Okay. So I view each character in this movie as being a cipher for different attitudes about how to work within a corrupt system. Our main character at first is just about sort of riding it through. The system sucks, but if I can just get to the end of it, I'll have a reward. So this can be about people, you see a lot of people who are, maybe they graduate college, they have a lot of student debt, they kind of know that the system's not right, but they feel okay, if I just kind of plow through this at whatever, there'll be a reward at the end. That's the sort of if you work hard, you will succeed thing. That sort of American dream bullshit that people in this country used to believe, and some conservatives still do. As the time goes on, after about maybe the first month, really, he sort of realized that's not true. I mean, you can't just kind of glide through and hope for success at the end. Then you have the manslaughter guy, and he kind of has a similar, he's very just sort of pragmatic in where if he's doing well, if he's in a good position, a good level on the hierarchy, then he's fine. He'll be your friend, he'll joke with you, but if he's at a bad time, he'll try to keep a sliver of morality, but he's pretty much still cutthroat every man for himself. And that's almost if I'm doing well, I'll be nice, if I'm not doing well, I will cut your throat to do better. It's just sort of a brutal me above everything else, and a fluid morality based on my own success kind of thing. And then later, one of the other cellmates he has, it was a woman who had worked to put prisoners or volunteers into this prison, and then she ends up joining herself. And she tries to do something where she knows that based on just the level of food that's put up at the top versus how many people are in this prison, that if everybody only took their basic share, there would be enough for everybody. So sort of equal distribution, basic sort of, not real communism, but what an outsider thinks of communism without knowing any of it and not having read any communist literature. And so her idea is that if she just makes a plate for the next level and tells people to do that out of their own rationality or goodwill, they would do that. Now, they don't, and there's an interesting reasoning for this. So, people, because they shift in different levels, so you could be at a very bad level and you could be almost starving, and then the next time you're higher up and you get your pick of the litter. The idea is that the people who were in a bad position but are then in a good position in a later month, even though you would think they might have empathy for those below them because they were once there, the fact that they're higher up in the prison, it gives them a sort of a fake sense of entitlement or a false sense of meritocracy. So it's that now that I am here, I deserve it for myself because I've already suffered. And I feel like that is sort of a call to like modern day millionaires or billionaires like your Bill Gateses and your Jeff Bezos, where they have enough money, they weren't always rich, so they weren't like born into wealth necessarily. So you would think that they would know better, but then they still sort of hoard their wealth. Like maybe they throw a little to charity or whatever, but they still hoard it almost because they feel like they deserve it because they didn't have it before. So it's sort of an indictment of that idea, that people who were once poor and they were able to beat the odds to have upward mobility, they still hoard their wealth regardless, even though they know they should know better. So it's sort of a commentary on those type of people, I think. And sort of the... It's also, I mean, the fact that this takes place in a prison is similar to that old The Prisoner's Dilemma, where you have a bunch of people who think they're working in their own self-interest by being selfish, but it would actually be more in their self-interest to work together. So you have that, it's sort of basic that. Like, if everybody did follow what this woman says and just made that, then everybody would be much, much happier for the course. But because there's like this knee-jerk the sort of... fake idea about human nature, even though human nature is not innate and is sort of based on societal construct and conditions, regardless of what my high school English teacher used to say. Yeah, so it's sort of an interesting manner, but it's also, I think her character is also sort of a commentary on people who try to change things in a system through sort of polite rationality ways, and people who try to change systems from within that system, because she is a part of the system before, and then she literally joins, as opposed to being part of like this evil, it's just called the administration in the movie, aside from just being part of this administration and sending people into the prison, she personally decides to become a subject of this experiment or a prisoner in the prison to change it from the inside. So you can argue that that's not the best practice for changing corrupt systems, but that's definitely her philosophy. Her philosophy is, and it's a failed philosophy in the film, is to encourage people to do that by playing on their best nature kind of thing. And I think that's sort of a commentary on failed ways of changing systems. Like, you could also argue with the recently, sadly failed Bernie Sanders campaign that his idea was to sort of start a groundswell grassroots movement that would change the system by flooding new people into that system, so that you could take independents or young people who don't vote, flood them into the apparatus of the Democratic Party, and then change the Democratic Party from within. Didn't work. He tried it in 2016, he tried it in 2020. Practically, it doesn't seem to be a strategy that works at this current time in the United States, even though those campaigns have at least moved the Overton window slightly to the left in the United States of America. But enough of contemporary politics. So I'd say it's a criticism of that particular aspect of trying to incorporate change. I mean, a little bit skewed to that is our main character then decides to kind of do the same thing, but through threats. And so he's like, if you don't do this, I'll shit in your food every day till it goes in. And so that's the idea of trying to force people to do the right thing. So you could argue that is something like the Soviet Union post-Lenin would do, or something. It's like, do the right thing or else kind of thing. Does that practically work? Sort of. I mean, I mean, you can rule through fear or through negative reinforcement, but it doesn't really change hearts and minds, and it doesn't make people believe in something. You're just forcing them to do it. But on a practical nature, rather than trying to sort of rationally talk to somebody who's already indoctrinated within a system, because that's very hard to unbrainwash someone or to change someone's mind about anything. So slightly more effective, but still not very effective. And then the last cellmate our main character gets is a guy who is literally trying to move up with upward mobility, where he has a rope and he tries to get people on higher levels to help him climb up to a different level. Because you can ride the platform down. The movie doesn't quite make clear if it would let you go up if somebody let you go up. So far, the movie's rules are only that you can't take food off of the platform and hold on to it for a while. You can only eat it while the platform is at your level. But it never really answers that question. So this is about a guy who believes in upward mobility in a very literal sense, about like climbing up to different levels. But he doesn't get very far, and when he thinks he can, he ends up getting shit in the face. So that was sort of another, with when you do get to a new level in this prison every month, it's not based on any merit or anything. So basically the film is arguing that people who get higher and lower up, it has nothing to really do with merit. It's a lot of just luck and randomization. But people who actually try to get up to a higher level because of merit, they're just going to get shit on and fail. So the movie definitely has a argument against the basic concept of any realistic upward mobility. And then they end up deciding on a different strategy after a while, our main character and his final cellmate. And that strategy is that they'll sort of ride the platform down all the way to the bottom because they're looking for some stuff, and because they know that once the platform gets all the way to the bottom, it will shoot all the way to the top, because that happens every night. And that's a way to escape, but B, they can also send something as a message. And in this case, it's a very opulent food item. And so at that point, they arm themselves with weapons. They force people on like the first 50 levels to not eat anything, or they'll hit them across the face, kind of thing. So again, it's sort of making people do the right thing through fear and violence. So again, that's probably a critique of quote-unquote communist states, even though the phrase communist state is an oxymoron, because communism is a stateless, classless society. So I think it's against that sort of system. So when the director in interviews has said this is a criticism of both capitalism and socialism, he probably just means more like quote-unquote communist states, as far as trying to force equality versus a democratic state that espouses capitalism. So they try that strategy. And at one level, they end up at a level with the upward mobility guy's, let's say, mentor, I guess, or someone he used to know before, and he basically tells them sort of a hybrid between the woman who's working from the inside strategy and our main character strategy, which is you don't hit somebody right away, you try to reason with them first. If you can't reason with them, then you hit them, which is I'm not sure if the film is actually espousing that strategy as far as revolution or changing inside. It's basically try to reason with someone first. If you can't reason with them, beat the shit out of them. So it's sort of give them the carrot first and then the stick if they won't take the carrot. Don't know if that's what the movie's arguing, but that seems to be the strategy toward the end that our main characters are going, until they reach their ultimate end. And now part of the ambiguous ending is what the ultimate goal is, where they end up sending something to the top so that the people who cook the meals and everything end up seeing what they're sending up. And the idea is that what they're sending up is the message. But what is the point of that message, I guess, is the main crux of the film. Whereas when the people who are up there, and we do know they're not just throwing stuff together. There are scenes where we see like a head chef, and he's very upset that there's like a hair in the food, and he holds up the hair to the different cooks to see who it matches, and he's going to cuss them out and everything. But if they see what they're sending up at the end of this movie, the film seems to imply that seeing the ultimate corruption or the ultimate lie behind the system will ferment people in a better position to be upset with stuff. So, the ending kind of works for the movie as far as how do you end a movie like this. But the ending, I don't think, really works as far as an answer to what this film's coming up with. Because if the film is basically pointing out a problem with society that most people kind of know the problem is now, between movies like Parasite and Snowpiercer and a lot of other movies that are kind of about this, even stuff like Joker that kind of superficially deals with these issues. Like, people kind of know economic inequality is a problem, but nobody agrees on the proper solution of this. I mean, there are conservatives in the United States who see that, the working man is having a hard time, and their solution was to vote a con man billionaire into the White House, so to fleece them even further. So clearly, we do not, as a society, agree on how to solve this problem. And there are some people who ignore that it's a problem, but at this point, I think those people are few and far between. But as far as if this movie is trying to offer a solution, it doesn't really. All it does is, what the movie is doing is, it's presenting the problem of modern society in a clear visual metaphor, and it's giving us characters who, aside from being fairly interesting and having good interactions, represent different philosophies about how to strategize or represent different praxis in order to fight this system, and what your strategies are, and how pragmatic they are versus idealistic. So in that sense, the film works, because it at least illustrates these basic political or philosophical issues in a very literal, movie-friendly way. But it does not really offer much in the way of solution. And, I mean, I don't expect one, director or screenwriter to know the solution to economic inequality, but I suppose the ending could have been more, I guess, or it could have at least given us a direction as far as what the director and the writer's opinion is to how to solve this. Mostly it just kind of gives us a bunch of different strategies, and the ultimate result of the movie is that maybe none of these work, or maybe a combination of these work, or maybe we should just try all of them and see if something works, or I don't know. So aside from that one quibble, this is an excellent movie. I would put this movie in sort of the sci-fi horror genre. I mean, it gets very gory and violent at times. And the one warning about the movie I will say is that right now, look, we're in the middle of this pandemic, quarantine, self-isolation thing, so a lot of people might be in a depressed or not very good mood. If you are not doing well mentally during this time, I would not recommend watching this movie right now, because the movie is so bleak. It is so oppressively bleak and depressing that you will be bummed the fuck out. Like, I love this movie. It is highly entertaining. It is extremely well made. I like that it deals with these concepts in this manner. But it is a downer. You are not going to be in a good mood after watching this movie. You're going to have to cleanse the palate with a comedy or something. So, if you're not doing well right now, I mean, stuff's up in the air. I mean, there are lots of people unemployed. There are lots of people depressed. They can't go out and do things. I mean, I'm pretty depressed that the movies are going to be closed probably till at least July, if not longer. So I would not recommend watching this movie in that kind of headspace. But if you're doing all right, if you're chugging along, maybe you're an essential worker like I technically am, so you're not in danger of losing your job or anything, then sure, go ahead. But it's a very good movie. It is very entertaining. The acting's great. I like the design of the different floors. Like, I know they only built one of the cubes for the movie cube, and then they just kind of changed the lighting. I'm not sure if they built more than one actual level, because you basically only see one level, and they can just change the number on the wall, and they sometimes look up or look down into different levels, but there's an easy way to do that in post. So I wonder how much of the set they actually built. But the set, I mean, it's just, gray, dark, concrete, whatever. They do some little changes of the lighting here and there when they change the temperature because someone's taken food off and whatever. Some characters... None of what the characters do feels out of character for that person. I mean, there's one character who brings their pet into the prison, and you think they wouldn't do that, because what happens to that pet is kind of obvious. But, you know, this movie has a lot of, you know, it has tinges of, like, cannibalism and murder and, you know, attempted sexual assault. There's a lot of dark shit in this movie. So it's definitely, I think the horror crowd will embrace it. Even more so than, because Snowpiercer is still more of an action sci-fi movie, and Cube is more of a straight-ahead sci-fi movie, and this definitely has more horror elements than both of those. But I think the horror community will like it. If you like dystopian fiction, if you like stuff that has sort of societal metaphors, things like that, it's very good. And one last thing before I go on this. So a few years ago, I did try to write a movie that was just like two people kind of stuck in a room kind of thing, like a Cube or like this. And so from that experience, because never finished it, I know that it is very, very hard to write stuff like that. To just stick two characters in a room and have it not be boring when a bulk of that movie or whatever is just going to be two people talking to each other. So this movie does find a way around that by introducing other characters through various mechanisms, and then because it's part of the horror stuff, it can incorporate, you know, some violence and stuff like that. But it is very hard to write movies like this. You'd think it would be simple. It is not. They're certainly cheaper to make a movie like this because you save on, you know, production value and things like that. Though this movie has some CGI and stuff, so I don't think it was super, super cheap. Not as cheap as like Cube could have been. And certainly Snowpiercer wasn't cheap. But it is not an easy thing to make a movie that's mostly just two people talking in a room, despite all of this stuff, and still keep it entertaining and lively. But this movie has a good pace. It's well shot and well edited, even though you're mostly just taking place in this one room. It doesn't get boring. They find interesting ways of shooting it. Little tweaks to the lighting and the color grading to help it be a little different for each floor you're on, that kind of thing. It's phenomenally well made. I am definitely looking forward to whatever else this director ends up making. I don't know if he's done anything before this movie. And I only heard about this movie like a few weeks before I watched it. And it's been on Netflix for like a month now or so, maybe a little bit longer. But yeah, definitely a strong, strong film, and I highly recommend it. So, before I go, because I've already rambled long enough on this movie that you've probably already seen, I am still attempting to make more videos than I normally have been lately, but it's a matter of I'm working kind of from home, but also kind of from the office, depending on what's going on. So I still have that going on, and just general fighting off of like laziness and lethargy and all that stuff. But I'm gonna try to pump out a few more videos, and I'm hoping to put out more movie reviews than I normally do, because lately with, you know, my life being busy, it's mostly just been like tasting different foodstuffs and beverages, but I'm trying to do more movie-related content because that's where my passion is. So, hope you're all doing well. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay at home if you can, mask up if you have to go out, and talk to you next time.